Massive liquidity onboarding into Japan. Yes, specifically at Japan, that's important. And of course, why it's big for these projects. We'll cover a few numerous ones and connect the correlation of what's happening in real time right now. Consider smashing the like on this one, and let's just get into it. Rob and Rue will give you guys some things here in regard to their commentary, but what do we have? Well, recently, there's been a lot of talk about Uniswap. So big shout out to Rue on his thumbnail a few weeks back when Rob was here in the Phoenix area. Rue had a thumbnail that says, is this JASMY's Uniswap moment? And we call this together, all three of us, about 8 days before it happened. So all this stuff that you're about to see is aging really, really well. Number one, let's start this off. We promise we'll get into like the Zebec side of things, your ripples, you name it. We see from Uniswap Labs specifically the announcement. They point out, we are announcing today a strategic integration in collaboration with Securitize to make BlackRock USD institutional digital liquidity fund BUIDL available to trade via Uniswap X through Securitize. Now, we get it. This is not necessarily today. This is February 11th. Here's the point. Let's come back on frame on this. We will go further than most are doing. We will not just scratch the surface on this. I promise you, you want to see more about this, and here's why. As I pull up more information about this, I want to put some emphasis on BlackRock and, of course, Securitize, and I'll share some key documents in regard to that. As we jump into some of these things, I don't know if people are even aware of this, but even from Securitize, well, Securitize pointed out back in March 5th, 2024, how they announced Japan's first United States dollar-denominated green finance security tokens. All right, so why point this out? Well, for one, boom, Sony Bank is part of the whole mix, Sumitomo Mitsui Trust Bank, and of course Securitize. We know about the connections to JASMY with Sony Bank. We know specifically also Sumitomo. But again, Securitize is part of that mix. And again, if you think about this, it's the whole idea of US dollar-denominated green finance security token called the ST by Sony Bank and Corporation, and of course Sumitomo. And again, this whole thing of a security token platform with Securitize. At that time, that was a milestone, but I also want you guys to keep in mind that the structure of offering by SMTB and distributed by Sony, it will proceed all this into green bonds supporting environmental effects, etc., etc. There's numerous investors that were participating in that particular time, and if anything, let's read this quote. This partnership highlights Securitize's commitment to broadening the scope of security tokens in Japan, says Iji Kobayashi. And that guy is part of Securitize Japan's country head. We are dedicated to advancing towards a fully tokenized world, providing convenience, efficiency, and security. All right, this part about convenience. I want to talk about this because when we get more into the whole thing, it will allow you to understand why we are breaking this down, and we're going to jump into the Uniswap side of things. And again, like we just shared here, BUIDL is on Uniswap X, strategic integration. All right, so again, why get into this so much? Well, here's why. Let's come back in the frame on this one. Back in 2021, you guys can look into the chart yourself. All right, we saw a absolute massive influx of many meme projects that had your Uniswap V1 and V2 contracts specifically integrated with functionality with Uniswap. Why? Because they were just that. They were ERC20. So for one, you would look up these meme projects. Most of them were memes. Some of them did have utility. And again, you would need native Ethereum to be paired up with whatever particular ERC20 meme coin project there was, etc., etc. Again, think about this. There's so many new people at that time to crypto. They just came off the boat of Robinhood. I would always joke about this. You're like, what behind the ears from Robinhood? You jump over to something like Uniswap and it seems so intimidating, but Uniswap created an effective platform to make it convenient. Again, back to the terminology you just saw from BUIDL. Again, BlackRock Securitize on convenience. So it's important to recognize some of this, but more importantly is to recognize, back to the highlight, and then we'll jump back to the panel. Again, how this came together, why it came together. Again, users can access Uniswap X liquidity for BUIDL via Securitize today. And more importantly, how Uniswap Labs had this collaboration to unlock liquidity options for BlackRock and BUIDL. But guess what we're going to do? We're going to jump into all this here in a bit, because we're going to get to the Japanese side of things. Want to get some of you guys' thoughts about this, because again, we called it early. We said that when it came to JASMY, this was their Uniswap moment, and they of course created what? JASMY swap, and of course the meme pad, etc., etc. So when we get further into this, you will see how we connect things like Zebec. You'll see how we connect things like obviously ripples, etc., etc. But I want to just kind of pause, as you would say, Rue, pause here and jump over to one of you guys about this, because I do feel as though it's a big deal. I have been in and out of Uniswap. I've shifted that liquidity into other projects, but even Uniswap, right, the UNI token is a pretty solid project.
Now, people may not be aware, but there's a lot going on with Uniswap recently, in which they changed their tokenomics to kind of put more, let's say, value in the token, Uni itself. A lot of people say that the way that Uniswap was the way it was before was because of the way that Gary Gensler left the market, where some people were so afraid of things being a security, they put a lot of the value, let's just say they put a lot of the value not in the token, but in Uniswap Labs itself. So the fees were going to the Uniswap Labs team, and the token it lacked as much value as it has today since they made this change. So good for them for making the change to make the token more valuable. You also see it as a candidate for a Bitwise ETF. So that's going to happen. So a lot of these things they made the changes for probably gave it a lot more value. I see any project related to build or BUIDL, however you want to say it, basically being in the in crowd. I've seen Tron related to builds, Ondo, and now we see Uniswap. Basically, anything that is related to build, they're basically in the in crowd. So Zebec, you can indirectly say they're related to build because they're related to Ondo and the USDY token, and how they can swap out and swap in. There also with ZeroHash, they have some relation to build through the I think it's USG USG. I'm gonna butcher this. It's like USUG or something like that. Another product that Ondo offers, that's related to treasuries that can be translated 24 hours a day into USDC. Also has a build relationship there. So cool to see Uniswap as a part of that. Cool to see them with Securitize, who has investors like Ripple, investors like Circle, investors like ZeroHash. So good to see Uniswap aboard. It seems like they're with the right crowd.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, my friend. I'll try to sum it up as best I can. It's funny because I had just made a video around 2 weeks ago covering top three blue chips that are on my watch list moving forward for this cycle, and Uniswap was actually number one. And then, sure enough, I mean, mainly one of the reasons was the whole ETF application that was in. That was a big deal. Also, Uni 4.0. But now this BUIDL with BlackRock, and then you look at the connections here. You've got with BUIDL, you've got Uniswap now, Ondo, Zebec, Pith, right? Fantastic projects. And how often do we say birds of a feather. You want to pay attention to the connections to a lot of these projects that are going to be successful in the future, in my opinion. But it's funny you talk about the 2020 cycle, 2021 cycle, because I'm going to take you back in time for a moment. And at that time, I was a complete degen over on Uniswap. I was in a group over on a Telegram, and we were over on Uniswap on a regular basis. I'm going to call it Pump.Fun 1.0 at the time, right? Where we would just go in there, we would look at brand new meme coins that were launching, and we would get in at like $300 market caps and stuff like that, and we'd just sell, get in another one, goes up a bit, sell. We were complete degens. A lot of them were, half of them were scams and rugs or whatever, contracts you were getting locked in, you couldn't sell, stuff like that. So but it was a fun time at that time, and it's now expanded exponentially into the meme culture we have today. Primarily over on Solana has really taken over that aspect of it. I mean, not just with Pump.Fun. I mean, meme coins were getting big on Solana before Pump.Fun came along, but we've now evolved and it's gotten so much bigger. So, I like to call it Pump.Fun 1.0. So, but go Uniswap, right?
I like that analogy. That's pretty cool because, let's face it, Pump.Fun and Solana ecosystem and whatnot. It's a good analogy. So I want to share with you guys before we jump into the next part of what we have. It's just some brief notes, and I know I could share like a lot of documents, but I don't want to make this video like hour or 2 hours long. A little bit more emphasis, ladies and gentlemen, on specifically Securitize. So if you were to look this up yourself, and if you know about it, great. It's the tokenization initiatives. Believe it or not, Securitize Japan, yes, Japan, they did launch that Japan first US dollar denominated green finance security tokens and the country's first tokenized film fund. Now you have to keep in mind, these involve tokenizing assets for investment. Yes, investment. We know, like Securitize especially, right? They're all about those investments, but it does focus on sustainability and entertainment sectors. Now, when I think about JASMY, they have a lot of connections to, Rob, right? Like your entertainment sectors. I mean, heck, even like Sony Entertainment. I remember back, PlayStation 1, as soon as you boot up that disc, it was a magical moment, right? It would say Sony computer, what? Entertainment. So anyway, that's interesting to me. Something else I want to point out that is hardly ever covered, you guys, is the partnerships. Now, Securitize in itself has partners with Japanese firms like Decurrent. Now, I can't recall, Rue, that you covered Decurrent in the past, but it's an operator of the DCJPY Tokenized Deposit Project, and basically in a nutshell, that will settle digital securities transactions using tokenized deposits. Okay, so again, Larry Fink has put a lot of emphasis in 2023, especially 2024, and going into 2025 about tokenized deposits, capital market ecosystems, and so on. But this collaboration, if you're to look into it, you guys, involves over 100 Japanese companies. It does include major banks. Securitize has also received investments from Japanese institutions such as MUFG, so we know about the correlation even with things with JASMY as far as that goes, and also SBI, and that means supporting its expansion into Japan. Now, something I want to point out is, again, just like JASMY, Securitize is all about that regulatory framework. JASMY has had the title of being, quote, Bitcoin of Japan. Doesn't mean they have any ties to actual Bitcoin. It's just a label, as we know, because they're the first to become regulatory compliant. If you combine these factors, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to Securitize activities, well, that complies with Japanese regulatory framework under what? The FSA and the Act on Securitization of Assets, which goes all the way back to 1998. All right, so think about what I just mentioned. I mentioned Securitize with firms in Japan like Decurrent, operator of DCJPY. Why would I want to expand on it? Why wouldn't I want to expand on it? We know by definition that JASMY is trying to launch their own stablecoin. Maybe some people are like, it doesn't seem like they are, but if you look into the patents that we've shared on our channels, they actually do have something going on with that. And in fact, I think the last time I shared something about that was the end of 2025 going into this new year. Again, with JASMY is JPYD, not DCJPY. So again, if I'm securitized, Rob, I'm looking at JASMY and I'm saying, you know what? We already have this thing with DCJPY. When JASMY launches officially JPYD, I look at Securitize realizing, look, we already have our ducks in the row. Why wouldn't we want to get behind their product, which is JPYD? Now, I know that's not here yet, but the reason why we're pointing this out to you guys is for you to understand how slept on things like JASMY is. Because, basically speaking, we already called it. Rui already has it on his thumbnail in his channel. We called it 8 days early on things like JASMY Swap, and we called so many things early. We called, for example, Panasonic. Shout out to you, Rui, pointing out. You're like, I actually cover that, call that like 2 years early, and it is true because we go deep in the research. Before we continue with this, Rob, you already went to Japan. You already met Hara. Can you give us any hint, any discussion about specifically any mention in regard to stablecoins, et cetera, et cetera? Because let's face it, even here abroad in America, there's a lot of talk, especially lately with the Clarity Act, a lot of emphasis on what? Yield and stablecoins.
Well, our discussion never really got into JPYD or anything like that when I spoke with him. But I would like to emphasize and touch on what you were talking about. You say it's not here. It's not here until it's here, right? And to stress the connections and the realization of how possible this kind of a partnership, collaboration, or whatever you want to call it, is between JASMY and Securitize. Well, I mean, JASMY already has massive credibility with a lot of their partners. Toyota, right? We know that. We know Panasonic, and so many more. But I don't know if you want to share my screen there that I have, but looking over at Securitize, right? Major asset managers that they're working with. I mean, you've got BlackRock, you've got Apollo, Hamilton Lane, right? Van Eck. You scroll down. What else do you have? Notable partners, BNY Mellon, right? Wormhole, World Liberty Financial, Cantor Fitzgerald, right? Uniswap Labs, which is what we're talking about right now, right? SBI, again, Japan, right? And Algorand, got to give a shout out to Algorand, obviously, right? ISO 200, baby. InvestCorp. So that would fit perfectly with all of the other collaborations that JASMY has at the end of the day. And why would they work with a company like JASMY? Well, Max already touched on it, right? They are the only digital asset project in Japan, which is the hardest, strictest regulatory regime, regulatory jurisdiction in the world. They're the only digital asset company out there that has legal clarity. That would be one of your primary reasons.
It is, and I know that you want to chime in on this, Rue. Something that I think is important that we chime in on. So Rue and I did that master class, 6 parts, right? I saw it on the screen, my friend. You're like, hey, is he going to mention ZeroHash? And that's okay. We do see from, well, we lost it. If you could share that again, it's okay. You don't need to. But the one that was on the list was ZeroHash, okay? Actually, we'll re-add to the screen real quick. So you see here specifically right there. And what does it mention? It says, specifically speaking, I want to zoom in myself on this one. Let's see here. Yes, fiat and USDC funding rails for tokenized assets. Again, notable partnerships. So again, Rue and I cover this a lot when it comes to specifically the Zebec coverage, and we're going to jump into that right now. And I know that Rue, you want to chime in on this. So this is my treat. I wanted to share it with Rue. Before I have you chime in, brother, I want you to see this for yourself because maybe you didn't see it. So for one, I thought it was interesting to see with the recent news from Uniswap Labs, boom, this right here, and at the very top, just in case you guys lost what we're talking about, BUIDL on Uniswap X. Again, Uniswap, BlackRock, Securitize. And again, right here, this collaboration with Uniswap Labs alongside Securitize is a notable step in the convergence of tokenized assets with decentralized finance. The integration of BUIDL into Uniswap X marks a major leap forward in the interoperability of tokenized USD yield funds, because that's been the news a lot with stablecoins. Said who? Robert Mitchnick, global head of digital assets at BlackRock. And again, BlackRock has also made strategic investment with the Uniswap ecosystem. And again, shout out to people like this who recognize Rue and I's collaboration or in-person collaboration, where we pointed out April of last year, basically BlackRock, Blackstone are partners with Zebec Network in the form of things like the indirect stuff, right? When we talked about obviously Blackstone, the connections to people like Jim Breyer. But again, I agree with the statements. Anchorage are a digital asset platform. Rue and I cover that. Thank you to Crypto X-Man for that. And then on top of that, shout out to Rue. He put out at least a couple things about this. And if anything, I'll leave it up there on the screen for you, brother. Because if anything, I know you want to chime in on this. We did talk about a lot in person about Robert Mitchnick and especially Simon Babakani, the key university, right, that they went to together. So I know you want to share some stuff. Go for it.
So yeah, and collaboration never before said before Max and I found the information there where Simon Babakani and head of digital assets at BlackRock, Robert Mitchnick, they attended the same college. Not only did they attend the same college, they were in the same college in that college, if that makes sense. Like, for example, I went to Michigan State University and I studied in the College of Engineering. Well, they both studied in the College of, I believe it was maybe either commerce or communication. Like, if we click on those
Yeah, I said.
boxes, it'll show.
Yep, I
But
showed on screen. It was Queen's University.
yep. So it was Queen's University, but I'm not again which the college it is. We'll show you there pretty soon. Bachelor's of Commerce. Okay, so they were in the College of Commerce together, and that speaks leaps and bounds. Like, there's some things people could speculate. There was Simon directly chosen to lead Zebec because we know BlackRock, like Max just showed you there, BlackRock and Blackstone have connections to Zebec. So is it possible that Robert Mitchnick was like, okay, I know my boy Simon, he can get some stuff done over there at Zebec. Let's make him head or COO of Zebec so he can get some things done over there. Maybe it's possible, but one thing is for sure is that Simon, in his spaces, he did admit, yes, we went to school together and we know each other, and he's a good friend of mine. Okay, so very very interesting there, and that's Max has pulled up there. Robert Mitchnick has connections to Ripple. He was there for a summer at Ripple, in which he did some evaluations on it says fundamental valuation framework for crypto assets. Okay, so he's very familiar with Ripple. Makes a lot of sense when you think about who's partnered with Securitize. Well, BlackRock and Ripple are. Okay, so that dovetails right into what we're talking about with this company, Securitize. Now you can throw in ZeroHash, who is also partnered with Securitize, also partnered with Zebec. In a lot of ways, you can think it's almost maybe white labeled XRP, and that they describe it as rails for regulation. This ZeroHash to the rest of the crypto market. ZeroHash has deals with like Morgan Stanley. Like they also have deals in place, I think, with Walmart for a Walmart card that they use. to buy goods, okay, that has blockchain attached to it. So ZeroHash is a huge player out here that people really don't talk about too much, but Max and I did early on in our Zebec research, in which it was very clear from the beginning that ZeroHash was offering Ripple-like services, in which they said BUIDL or build. I'm just gonna call it build because I've seen Justin Sun refer to it as like let's build, and he spelled it the way that build spells build. Um, so um, early on in our research with that, you could tell that there was some XRP connected stuff there because they would say, okay, now build is available 24/7 with you know, conversion to USDC being 24/7. So it's interesting there. What Max shared is that there's some yield in reference to build. Okay, there are a couple different products that go kind of back to build that give yield. So it's interesting because with the Genius Act, you're not supposed to be able to quote unquote get yield, but Simon Babakani has told us there's ways around that. There's Ondo's, I think it's if I spell it, I can say it. USUG product that is a treasury that gives yield. There's another product that they have, of course, with Zebec, which is the USDY that also gives yield. They spoke about this at their Ondo Summit. Both of these two products, which are yield-bearing products, regardless of the Genius Act. So it's quite interesting to see that we're right here on the ground floor with anyone connected to Build, anyone connected to Ondo, anyone connected to ZeroHash, anyone connected to Securitize. We've gone over and over and over it, and we've made so many connections there. It's amazing. And just one more before I yield the floor. That my guy Maximus made with Cantor Fitzgerald. They were also on that list, at which Cantor Fitzgerald is bringing Securitize public in a stock called CEPT. Shout out to the Patreon. We cover stocks over there. CEPT is one of them. So that's a $1 billion deal, which Tammy Camp did a video on saying in some conference, this was the buzz of the town that Cantor Fitzgerald was going to bring them public, Securitize. So there's so many connections here, all of which should make you very happy as a Zebec holder, as a Uniswap holder, as an XRP holder.
Very good. I'm glad that you elaborated on it, and thank you for that shout out. I need to interject real quick, Rob, before we definitely get some of your take on this. I want to jump back to the visual, excellent visuals from Rue. Something I want people to not overlook, and it's basically this right here. Again, Robbie Mitchnick, head of digital assets, BlackRock. Now, this part where he says, or it says, during his time at Ripple, Robbie co-authored a fundamental valuation framework for crypto assets along with John Bates Clark medal winner Susan Ethe. Robbie has a bachelor's and BCOM degrees from Queen's University and an MBA from Stanford, where he graduated as an R.J. Miller Scholar and the Robichek Award winner in finance. He holds, now listen to this is the real kicker, a blockchain technology certification from MIT Sloan and is a CFA charter holder. All right, so try to remember the whole thing we just mentioned in regard to MIT. Here's why. Gary Gensler, not just because the sake of just mentioning the correlation, they both went to MIT. The way I look at all of this stuff is kind of like who's the kryptonite of it all? Or some of you guys are like Star Wars fans. It's like Jedi versus Sith Lord, right? Like Gensler was like a Sith Lord. All right, check this out. So we pull this up again. It's just a basic search. Let's share it on the screen. you see here, did Gary Gensler go to MIT Sloan? Well, while Gensler did not attend MIT Sloan as a student, he was a professor at MIT Sloan School of Management. Do you find that interesting? And like it says here, Gensler earned his undergraduate degree in economics and an MBA from Wharton School, of course, at University of Pennsylvania, which, technically speaking, University of Pennsylvania is part of the Ivy League schools. But the role at MIT before becoming SEC chair in 2021, he is professor of the practice of global economics and management at MIT Sloan, focusing on blockchain, digital assets, and financial technology. Again, he had a return to MIT following his term as SEC chair. He returned to MIT Sloan School of Management 2025 as professor of the practice. So, again, we know about Gensler. Everybody knows about Gensler, but you don't know about Robbie Minchnick, and the findings and the research is absolutely profound because we have at least somebody, a good guy, on our side when it comes to some of this. Rob, definitely want you to jump in on this because I know you have a lot of thoughts on some of this. You cover a lot on your channel. I mean, come on, man. I mean, the findings, when we get real deep into all of it, whether it's JASMY, Zebec, there's correlation here. We'll give you guys some final connectors, but definitely want to get some of your thoughts so far.
I actually surprisingly don't have a whole bunch more. You guys put a pretty good bow on everything. I'm not even going to get into the Gary Gensler thing because I got into that in our last video that we made. So sorry to disappoint you there. I did, however, want to give a quick shout out to the screen that I'm sharing. Our channel sponsor for all of us, BTCC Exchange, guys. I do all my trading over there. Our VIP Patreon groups do their trading over there. I trade gold, silver. I do all of my spot buying over there as well, guys. Fantastic exchange. Get up to $10,000 in bonuses by using our links down below and funding your account today. And Gary Gensler, actually, now that you mention it, I am going to start doing a little bit of research into see if I can find any new videos of Gary back over at MIT and see if he's changed his tune at all in front of his classmates or his students, sorry, when it comes to digital assets. Because we know, to go back to your reference of using the Force, Anakin Skywalker was supposed to protect the Force, not destroy it, right? Well, Gary Gensler, in very much the same way, when he was handed the chairmanship of the SEC, everyone was incredibly bullish because he was supposed to be pro-crypto. He was our Anakin Skywalker.
Love that analogy. So you're trying to say that Gensler was the chosen one? We'll see how that goes, right? Anyway.
You were supposed to protect the Force.
Yeah. We're going to now jump into some icing on the cake, in my opinion. I'm sure, actually, it was you, Rob, that you shared this. I don't know if you shared it, Rue. Maybe you have. But basically speaking, it's actually this, not this, but it's the one after this. But so we'll mention this real quick, and then we'll jump into a little bit more. We want to establish what I like to call kind of like a paper trail here. So for one, Zebec is heading to XRP Las Vegas, largest XRP conference in the world. CEO Simon Babakani will be speaking alongside leaders from across the industry on the future of blockchain payments and real-world utility. Again, I think that's great to basically share this. And also see here, you have CPO from Solana. We'll get into some of that. So again, some highlights. Brad Garlinghouse of
Right
Ripple.
now, you're sharing about the super app. Is that what you?
Oh, no, it's not. Sorry about that. Let me jump over to that. So it is right here. You see Brad Garlinghouse. Thank you for that, by the way. You see Brad Garlinghouse. You see, again, Simon, all these key guys, right? And again, I want to share some more about the whole thing of Solana, but I will here in a bit. So again, I want you guys to understand the Zebec super app definitely goes live on February 25th. All of Zebec's ecosystem under one roof. And again, this whole concept of an ecosystem. Okay. Now, before we elaborate more, I don't know if you guys know this, but I want to give a big shout out to Ryan Solomon over at Gen Infinity. He covers so many things, right? He covers Hedera, XDC, XRP, everything. A good man. I follow a lot of his work. We follow each other. And if anything, he shared a lot, right? So we did see here in December the first announcement, basically, that institutional crypto giant R3 launches Corda on chain with a real world asset marketplace, and it's built entirely on Solana. Um, I'm not going to play the clip, but there's another one I do want to basically get into. And what I want you guys to understand, I'm going to come back in the frame, it's just some of the notes, okay? So here's the thing. When we finalize our video here, we know that technically speaking, Zebec is the only one of the Solana ecosystem that is ISO 222 compliant. Unless there's something out there that I don't know about, which there could be. I never make the claims that I know everything. If I ever say that to anybody, you will know that something's wrong, right? Because we're all learning every day. So here's my main thing. The announcements that just came out. In fact, I'll pull this up on the screen. And actually, excuse me, before I do, SBI R3 Japan. What's one thing that grabs your attention? Obviously, XDC. Again, that key thing about that bridge when it comes to not just XDC, but like, again, going from proof of concepts, the bridge for, I mean, I don't even need to explain R3, right? Like R3 is so major, it's game changer, but we are talking about Japan. So you have SBI, R3 Japan, you have, again, XDC has always been part of that mix, XRP's been part of that mix, so is Solana part of that mix? This is where I'm going to go with this. And something I want to pull up, and I apologize, I meant to put this other area into the mix. I do want to come full circle with JASMY for a second, and then you'll see where we connect this, because this is good. This is really, really good. Again, hardly anybody knows about this unless you're a hardcore JASMY enthusiast, but JASMY pointed out a while back, I think it was originally from Hara, okay? But it says here, the story. Together with JASMY, we'll lead the global RWA market by introducing DeFi products related to RWA. So again, back to what you saw originally from Uniswap, BUIDL, you name it, even Zebec's side of things. It said Ethan Kim, CEO of Neopin, we will actively launch DeFi services and products to increase our market share in Japan, including the launch of Neopin's Japanese service this year, and further strengthen partnerships and promising blockchain companies in Japan. It does mention Hara. Hara pointed out, we look forward to developing our new challenge in blockchain with Neopin, which has proven track record in the Korean market. So we're going a little bit outside Japan. We will mutually cooperate to build a community, implement use cases. Now watch this. We jump into this. Actually, I think it's right here. It says basically the whole thing of Neopin. So it says, in addition to DeFi, Neopin is preparing to increase its market share in Japan in various aspects such as games, mainnet, and local marketing. It has announced a series of partnerships with SBI NFT, subsidiary of SBI Holdings, large Japanese financial holding company, which is Lena Network. So again, when we think about JASMY and some of these connections, you have to keep in mind where JASMY has a position with this, especially when it comes to SBI. Now, when we jump back to Solana, just came out yesterday. Again, you can see where I'm going with this. We introduced what was going on in December. Yesterday, shout out to Ryan Solomon of Gen Infinity. He has this interview, and I'm not going to play the whole thing, right? In fact, I'm probably not going to play any of it. But basically, he says, I went into this not expecting the answer would be Solana, but once I experienced the community for real, I realized it was the right answer. Richard Brown reveals why Inside R3 chose Solana. So I would encourage you guys to listen to this because he gets into why that happened. But the main take is this already happened. All right, so since it happened, now let's have a discussion on this. Because the way I look at it is like this. It's really just, it's plain and simple. The writing is on the wall. Solana, whether people like this or not, I want to point out some of the holes, in Solana. Solana was recently also, not just only chosen, but also chosen by R3. Okay? Who do you think would have first movers advantage when it comes to that? When we talked about the whole thing of ISO 222, it's the slept on one, which is Zebec, because they're the only one of that ecosystem that's ISO 222 compliant. Am I off base here of recognizing R3 in that Solana mix. I don't know if you want to take it, Rue, Rob, whoever wants to, and then we'll wrap it up. But I think these are the things of understanding that massive liquidity is onboarding into Japan, Korea also, and abroad, and why it's big for all of these particular projects. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it comes down to liquidity, like you touched on, right? Too many people are counting on catalysts and stuff, but what really, at the end of the day, is what's going to matter is these connections, these companies that are working together and that are connected. I agree with you. Zebec is a perfectly positioned, being the only ISO 20022 compliant project in that ecosystem, and tying in R3. Absolutely, you're not off base at all, in my opinion.
Rue?
Just want to bring up a document that both you and I reference a lot, Max. Let me share my screen here. So if you look at this document, it has Corda, it has Canton here with Hyperledger, right? So I think that's pretty interesting. So if you say Canton, okay, you got Solana and R3. Well, for Corda, XDC is the settlement for R3, right? And you got Canton over here. Well, let's just mosey on over to Zebec Cards follows. Well, they have Canton as a follow, and they also have XDC Foundation as a follow. And what is Zebec built on? It's built on Solana. So maybe this was something that was already always going to happen. Maybe we get some more fleshed out ideas of what this is occurring here, or maybe it's even a continuation of this document in that the interledger is kind of getting a even bigger connection to Corda, but kind of via Solana, because I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but I think lately Solana just did something where XRP ledger is kind of native or working on Solana right now. So the interledger does work on Solana right now. So that might be kind of why we're getting this Corda plus interledger thing happening right now with what Max just showed.
Man, great findings there. I especially like that part where you shared basically who is following who. Those things do matter, let's face it. And, if it was just one, to me, it's like, okay, that's a coincidence. But if you're providing 2, 3, or 4 examples, to me, that is not a coincidence. Rob? Okay. Fair enough. I think we elaborated quite a bit on all this stuff. So, basically speaking, we got into a lot in that. Hopefully, you guys appreciate these type of deep dives. But it's clear, massive liquidity is onboarding into Japan. Gave you those specific examples. We brought some JASMY into the mix, a lot of that. But we also show you the correlation of Zebec, a little bit of XDC, and more importantly, an emphasis on Solana potentially choosing something like Zebec because of what? ISO 222, and of course the whole thing of Solana R3 choosing them. Why would they choose them? And again, go back to ISO 222. To me, Zebec takes the cake on that because they could get very well first movers advantage. We call it in our community on-demand payroll, just like XRP on-demand liquidity. So do us a solid if you listen to the entire thing and type in this keyword into the comments, and we'll give Rob the honorable mention. What will be the keyword if they listen to the entire thing?
ISO 20022 on Solana.
All right, that's a phrase. We like that. Thanks, Rob. Thank you, Rue. Saying goes, the research trumps flood 110%. May the Lord bless you all. We'll see you guys on the next video. Over and out.
God bless.
God bless.
Peace.